evening, everybody. We call to order the City Council regular meeting. Apologize for being a few minutes late in starting the meeting. We were a few minutes late in exiting our other meeting. Note for the record that all members of the council are present, excepting Mayor Bigelow, who is excused tonight. With that, we'll turn to Councilman Nordefeld for our opening ceremony.
Thank you. This week we had a horrible tragedy in our city with our code enforcement officer Jill Robinson losing her life in the line of duty. And I feel that it would be appropriate now to pay tribute to her and have a moment of silence. And I encourage you in this moment to offer your silent prayer in behalf of her family and loved ones who are mourning at this time. So we'll start that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Nordfeld. We do like to recognize those scouts who have come to work on their merit badges or rank advancement. Looks like we have one scout here. What we invite you to do, young man, is just come forward and tell us what you're working on here tonight, what troop you're in, and if you could tell us what school you go to, that generally tells us what part of the city you live in.
I'm Kevin Wilkie. I'm working on the citizenship and the community merit badge. I'm from Troop 97 and I'm going into Granger High School.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to the approval of our minutes, July 17th, 2018, to the council.
Move for approval of the July 17th minutes.
Second. Any discussion of the minutes? If not, we have a motion and second. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That has passed unanimously. We have an Employee of the Month award. For that, we'll turn to Councilwoman Karen Lane.
Thank you. Tonight's award actually was a resident came to my place of business and told me about these two employees, and so I asked him to send me an email. And so Wood, if you're here, Brian Masserone, and I'm probably not saying your name correctly, and Levi Martinez, please stand up. And I'll read this as we go. This is to compliment two of your very capable city employees. A while back, a new street light was installed by my house, and it was just too bright. One morning, a truck pulled up, and the employee, his name was Levi, was here to pour a concrete base for the new light. I met him and asked him about the brightness. He told me it would be no problem to adjust, and he would ask his partner to stop by with a bucket truck so he could reach the light and turn it down. A short time later, another truck showed up. I met Brian, another very nice guy. He made the adjustment, gave me his card, and told me to call anytime if they could help. The next morning, Levi came to remove the collar from the concrete he poured, and he checked to see if I was satisfied. He said that Brian had come by earlier to see how it looked. We settled on turning it down one more click. I felt like they really care about those of us in West Valley City. Great guys, both of them. So thank you very much. All of this is for you. Which one's Levi? Okay. I didn't. You look so much alike. Yeah, this is absolutely. Okay, here we go. And thank you so very much. Oh. Brian, I have your cup.
I want you to sit back up here and you got a camera always on.
You guys want to show me the street sign?
Just a little bit of stuff. And I have to say, I know our employees do great things every day, but I do appreciate when the citizens actually acknowledge it. So, thank you guys.
Hey, thank you. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is public comment. We'll note before we begin the public comment that we also have a public hearing on our agenda. The public hearing on the West Valley City budget for the fiscal year 2018 to 2019. So if you're here to comment on the budget, we will be there in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to hold your comments here so on our record and in our minutes we can keep everything organized. The public comment that we will have first is for anything that you wish to bring to the council's attention. Each speaker may take up to 5 minutes of a 30-minute total that we have set aside for this activity. You should address your comments to me. This is not a discussion, and we will not be taking action on any of the items that are brought up to us today because it's not fair to the rest of the city for us to take action on items that are not on our agenda and not noticed up appropriately. However, if you bring something to us that we decided we ought to check into, take further action on, discuss later, we do keep track of these comments and we will be then acting on them or discussing them in a future meeting. So I have a list of some people that have signed up here, and I don't know if you knew someone was going to read this, but they're not as easy to read as they might be. Looks like first on the list is somebody George.
Amen.
Would you like to comment at this time, or is that for later?
Well, I think it's about the street where I live.
Okay, could you come up to the microphone, please? Give us your name and address, and then you can make your comments.
My name's Joe George. I live on Highbury East off of 54 West. And we have 2 streets that is owned by you people. Stockport Way and Darlington Drive. You don't plow it, you don't sweep it. And I've been down to City Hall many times upstairs because we have a playground that's in the inside of it, a big one. And I've asked if they could put the speed limit to 10 to 15 miles an hour because we have many children. And all I get, state law, 25 miles an hour. I said, it's a playground. And I said, where I'm from originally, wherever there's a playground, you get 10 to 15 miles an hour speed limits. And it's a racetrack. For the simple reason we had to have the 2 streets because we got single homes where Darlington Drive goes into. And they use ours all the time, and it's a speed. And all they do, we wanted speed bumps, and they put these stupid things, triangle things in there. And they've been hit. And our roundabout's been hit, and that just costs us big bucks to fix it. And it's on the town street. But Ivory was the one that wanted it in there, so we're stuck with it. It's been hit 4 times in the 5 years I've lived out here. But that street, and I said to the HOA, the guys that do the landscape, and I said, you know, you shouldn't be plowing this. He said, well, how can we do your streets if we don't plow this. There's broken glass and everything, we try to pick it up, but the town, when they sweep 3100, they go down, they could come in there and do that. It's their street. And that's the big thing. I've been fighting it for 4 years. And all I get is 35. It's a state law. And it's a stupid law when you've got a playground and children are going back and forth. All day long. And they come from other areas also to play there because not many of them have the playground we have. And that's the big thing that we're having the problem. And it would be beautiful. You know, I think it could go to 10, 15. I don't think there'd be a problem. Give us the street then. If you're not going to plow it, you're not going to use the city sweeper to do it, might as belong to us. Then we can put 10 to 15. There's cars parked, because it's your street, there's cars parked all over. Everybody's got a 2-car garage, but they maybe got 3 families living with them. And they got about 4 cars, so that both sides of the street are full of cars. And the kids, you know, you gotta, and it's terrible. That's it.
Hey, Mr. George, would you, I just want to make sure we have the names of those 2 streets. Would you tell us those streets
Yeah.
again?
Off of 5400 West, it's Stockport Way coming in, which is 3045 South. And it goes to the roundabout and goes over to where the single homes are, Darlington Drive, which is 5335 West.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it. Oh, I want one question. I'd like to know what's the dollar per thousand on the residential, our taxes? What is the dollar, 17,000 or what is it?
We'll be discussing our
Oh,
taxes next on the agenda after.
Yeah, because it's not on the bill, and I was just wondering.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you. Next, it looks like we have a Don or Darren Cross.
That's John.
John Cross, so it is.
Okay. John Cross, 2545 South, 3560 West. I really wished I would have gotten up here last time we met and giving the accolades to Officer Robinson. She was really tearing it up in our neighborhood. So I'm really sorry to what happened to her. And then the other thing is regarding the noise at Beauart and Firestone, property adjacent to me. The noise starts at 3 o'clock. They're doing heavy manufacturing over there. I'm sure they're doing production. You guys changed the code so that they could do it. So I don't really know what our solution to the problem is. As I've said before, starts at 3, ends at 6, and if it's not so noisy that everybody in the neighborhood can hear it, it's noisy in selected areas where they're doing improvements on their lot next door to other adjacent properties. You know, it's fairly large property. So I don't really know what we're going to do. You know, with Firestone, we have some goofy arrangement where they come in off 3600 into their complex, and the roads are so tight they can't even make the corners, so their trailers have to bounce around the corners. So that's kind of jarring essentially all night long that they move. So that's where we stand with that. You know, between the airplanes, which I signed up for, the trains, which seem to be getting closer, the beeping of the trucks, the constant punch noise and the vacuum, the air handlers that they've got over at Board, it's just, I mean, it's just getting insane. And we'll go back over that again when we go over the tax issues, because I just feel like they should just pick up my taxes. They just become such an irritant. But we'll go over that when we get to tax issues. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to make public comment at this time?
Yes.
Please come up and give us your name and address.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janusz Arwojtano, but you call me John. It's much more easier. I actually grew up with West Valley. We came in '82. West Valley in Redwood with a 4-employee, probably max. I love West Valley. We have a chance to buy home anywhere, but we never did. We stay in West Valley. Actually, Me and my wife, we work with beauty and clean and beauty for 4 years to try to improve our city. But like a couple of gentlemen before me, if you guys do not work, doesn't matter what we do. And I understand you can't push anybody too far or too little, because that's what's happened with one officer, I'm sorry. And I talked to her many, many times. She's a beautiful lady. We feel sorry, actually, I called first one, probably to her office with sorrow. The bottom line is we live in a rich golf course. We have USANA, what used to be maybe 1 or 2 concerts a year. Somebody else by USANA recently. We have 18 one month, 14 next month. You know, if you take a picture from the plane, this is probably in a CNN or Fox News #1, how paradox this situation. You put in the back of my home, no parking, but everybody go to the front of my home and park. And USANA go at 11:30 p.m. So what you do, you wake up midnight, 1 o'clock, because somebody fight on your grass, straight in front of your home, where you pay $4,000 tax. Broom show once in a while. School, Silver Hill Elementary School, behind us. No speed bumps, nothing. People missing USANA or missing golf course, you know what they do. It's, if you guys be capable to do something, put like signs, put some speed bumps, speed. I would appreciate it, probably everybody else there. Thank you for my time, and thank you to listen.
John, tell them about that lady in your front driveway.
Just maybe you have it.
No, tell them, I mean, this is part of the issue of
Well,
what we're
the
putting
people
up with.
drilling, you know, this is kind of expensive homes. We paying very high income taxes there. People drilling holes in the basement, and then I have it right now. I'm not kidding you. I actually just served like you, where people move downstairs with the 3 small kids, whole family. I can use my master bedroom till 10 o'clock, because 10 o'clock this last weekend I have to close all my windows because of the barbecue exactly here, going straight. And I called a few times, complaining, you know, you have to maybe take a lawyer and spend money and on, but where's the city that I represent? I come with nothing, $60 in a packet to this country. Build everything by myself and my wife. She retired after 34 years. What, 4 months ago? Finally, we think where we get better living. Now we have help. Thank you for your time. If you do anything, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else that's come to comment at this time? Okay, we'll close the public comment portion and move to our Assistant City Manager, Paul Isaac. Do you have any comments, sir?
No comments, except to say that we appreciate all of you who come and express some concerns. We, as a staff, will work diligently on those issues, and we'll try to give whatever we can to the council so that we can rectify some of those problems.
Thank you. Any comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Our next item on our agenda is item 8, to accept public input regarding the budget of West Valley City for fiscal year 2018-2019 with the accompanying action, Resolution 18-124. Mr. Isaac, we're going to get some introduction on this from staff.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Mr. Welch, our Finance Director, forward, and he can present and perhaps answer some of the questions that you've already asked regarding the budget. Jim?
Thank you, sir. This is the annual hearing of the adoption for the budget of 2019. It is, Jake will be kind of running the slides here. Take a high-level view of the budget. We've been actually working on this budget since last December. Seems like we take the majority of the year evaluating, going over the expenditures, going over the revenues, and then present that budget and work with the council to make sure that we try and hit those objectives that the council outlines. And then, as you know, by state law, the elected officials are required to appropriate and adopt by resolution all the expenditures of the city. And so this is the formal adoption of the operating budget for the next year. A tentative budget was adopted last June. That allowed us to operate until this point. And then the final adoption takes place in August. That gives us the opportunity to review the tax rates and also consider any judgments, which in this case we actually did have a judgment basically against our property tax by individuals typically businesses, who have appealed their property taxes and were granted refunds. So that's the purpose of the public hearing for the tax rate. The budget is pretty routine. It's continual growth and recognizing revenues and expenditures as they change. We are required by state law to actually present a balanced budget, so we can't spend in deficit without finding a way to cover those holes, and they actually have parameters that require us to keep certain reserves on hand. So this budget is within those reserves, and it also meets the requirements to have that balanced budget. We make the budget also in accordance with Government Finance Officers Association, National Association standards, and that's designed to provide a transparent, clear document that allows a person to be able to basically take our budget, compare it with other documents and other budgets across the country and others that comply to those standards, and be able to understand it in a pretty clear way. So most of the questions that we see throughout the year that people might have about how much does it cost to provide a service, or what kind of revenues are you bringing in, those are found within the document that we produce for the GFOA standards. There's a number of things that impact the governmental budget. Most of them are very similar to what impacts an individual's budget. There's ongoing increasing costs of services. You may see utilities go up. You may see inflation start to eat into your operation a little bit as you make your utility payments and you make your mortgage payments. The city has the same issues. We have things like benefit costs that go up. We have utility rates that go up, and just the cost of providing services seems to be something that you don't see an awful lot of reduction in. And so as a result of that, we try and balance that with the growth in income that we hope we realize. That's very dependent upon the economy. The state has also designed the property tax revenue to be flat every year for the purpose of basically requiring the entities that if they want to increase that, they have to go through a property tax hearing so that people can be heard and that they can make a smart decision on that. Without adjusting those rates, there is no increase in property tax from year to year, and that would remain flat without any kind of inflation adjuster, regardless of the value of the property. So that's another reason that they allow people to have that hearing in August. In this budget, we're not proposing an increase for operations, so there's none of that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. There is a public notice that was put out about a judgment levy, and I'll talk about those rates specifically a little bit more. Jake. In our expenditure projections, as I mentioned, we start those in December, and we try and have most of the projections for the next year in January, February. For the public's information, we have a strategic planning retreat with the council where we go over the financial projections, and we also go over the priorities of the city, trying to identify what the next year is going to look like and do our very best to meet those objectives with the resources that we have. You see things like we consider all the expenditure portions of the budget. We have debt service for our bonds, for infrastructure. We have business site activities that would think things like the golf courses, the family fitness center. We also have community service type entities like the Harmon Home or the Utah Cultural Celebration Center. All of those things, we evaluate every single operation, and we come up with a budget that we do present to council. This year, the budget for the general fund, which is the operations of the city, is $82,391,000. You'll recall that earlier in the year when we adopted the redevelopment agency budget, the housing authority budget, and the building authority budget. With those budgets, the total budget of the city is about $142 million, and we present to you basically this is a This is a balanced budget that reflects the costs of continuing to do our operations. There was a question that came up during the first comment period about how much, I guess it was per taxes per individual in the city. Just to give you some kind of an idea, property tax on an individual basis, if we're just to take the property tax revenue and divide it by the population, it's about $223 per individual. If we do that for the budget, for the general fund, it's about $581 per person per year. Now that's a little bit, I don't know if there's a lot of relevance to that number. The majority of the property tax is paid by businesses. They're taxed at 100% of their taxable value. That would include all the commercial enterprises and anybody that has a secondary home, or anybody that has a manufacturing facility, malls, any of those things that are not tax exempt. So the majority of those property taxes are paid by those businesses. Residences actually receive a reduction of 45% on their property taxes from their assessed valuation. That shows up on their valuation notices. The revenue breakdown, to give you an idea of where the money is being spent. We actually collect 34% of our revenue from sales taxes. That's what we're projecting this year, and that's pretty typical. That fluctuates a little bit based on economic conditions. We've had a good year in sales tax, and we hope that will continue. The property tax makes up 38% of the revenue, and then the balance of 28% is made up from user fees, licenses, permits, things like that. So it's pretty well balanced wheel of revenues. If you compare that to a lot of budgets, I feel like we have kind of a really good three-legged stool. Try and keep that in balance so that if we have any kind of an economic shock, it does give us some sort of stability. In the expenses, 46% of our budget goes towards public safety, 32% for police, 14% for fire, and then the rest goes for other services for the city. That would be our community and economic development. It would be our, excuse me, our neighborhood services, parks and recreation, and then administrative services. I often get the question about how much money of our property tax bill actually goes to West Valley City. This slide is actually taken off of our website, and the public is certainly welcome to go in and plug their own estimated house value in there. It'll come up pretty close to this. There will be some variation because we don't have the final tax rates until all the public hearings are actually held. But of the typical property tax bill on a $238,000 home, which is the estimated value of the average home in West Valley City from the county, that's the latest assessment that they gave us. Of that $2,000 bill, 27% of it would go to West Valley, and then the Grant School District's 28% plus the state school assessment of 11%. So you've got about 39% that goes to education. The rest of it goes to service districts and other tax entities. You're welcome to look at that. And then down on the breakout, it breaks out our budget as to how the city actually spends our money. Property tax by, you might be interested in last year's rate. Actual true rate of property tax was 0.004145. This year the property tax rate has gone down to 0.003681. That doesn't represent necessarily a reduction in revenue because they keep revenue neutral. What that reflects is an increase in the assessed value of properties, even though the rate went down by 11%. This year, the city is holding a property tax hearing, which is tonight, and this is the notice that was published in the newspaper. There was a judgment awarded to businesses for a rebate of property taxes of about $191,000. That $191,000 is immediately payable out of the revenues of the city and would leave a shortfall without the provision that the state allows for a readjustment of values, not values, I'm sorry, a readjustment of the rate to bring the level of the revenues back up to even. To do that, it equates to about 27 cents a month or $3.26 per year as calculated in this ad. Last year we had a fairly large judgment levy. It was a little over $2 million. We actually adopted about $800,000 to help cover that hole. Because that judgment levy was significantly larger than what we had this year, the notice has an unusual situation where it shows a negative increase in our property tax rates, and that's a calculation that the state actually does. We don't do this, and they take that into account with it. So it wasn't a reduction, it was actually just a matter of keeping rates, keeping the revenues flat rather than reducing the revenues of the city. And so with that, that's the budget we present, and look forward to your consideration, and this will allow us to operate through the next fiscal year. By state law, we're required to adopt this budget so we can continue to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. A couple things I'd like to touch on, and I think would be of interest to the people. I think you addressed these already, but just to touch on them. As I looked at the information you provided us, this is all available on our website, is that right?
That is correct.
And I noticed that we have, it looks like our property tax revenue is projected to increase by about $1.4 million. And that would be due to new growth.
That is correct.
So that's not an increase of anybody's taxes.
No, there's no taxes that have gone into that. That would be new construction. That's the only growth. It's not valuation of existing properties.
Right, and I also would note that the sales tax is projected to increase by $2 million, so more than the property tax, and that's just based on the economy, and we always try to shop West Valley so that we keep that tiny portion of our sales tax within our city. The tax notice that goes in the newspaper says notice of tax increase, but we've not budgeted a tax increase. We're required to meet certain language by state law, is that right?
That is correct. The language that the legislature says we have to include if there's any type of adjustment in the rate is an increase when in fact this actually shows a decrease in the rate, and it's holding revenues level from where we were before.
Right, the rate is lower, revenue is the same.
Yes.
But there is a $2 a year increase on the average home to make up for rebates or judgments that typically businesses have received by protesting to the county, hey, you're taxing me too much, and that's redistributed so that we keep our revenues neutral.
That's correct, and the mechanism, I guess the way that actually works is that the court determines that businesses have been overpaying for X number of years, which has actually caused the residences to pay less than they probably should have. So this actually brings it up on a one-year basis. That rate will go down next year, and then we'll address another judgment levy. So this is a one-time adjustment to make up for that judgment that was awarded to the businesses for their rebate.
Right, and I would comment that as long as I've been on the council, we've looked at the judgment levy every year and captured that loss, really. It's a bill that we're saying we have to pay this year, $191,000. We didn't budget to pay a judgment levy that was awarded by the court, so we recapture that by just adjusting, and we're all going to chip in $3.26 on average this year to make up for that judgment levy. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions of Mr. Welch? Any comments at this time?
So the same adjustment would be made if someone went in and argued the value of their home? If the county said, you're right, your home is only worth this much, and that adjustment, the tax base would be, they would get that refund? I mean, it's probably a lot smaller than businesses get, but it can go both ways?
That is an adjustment in the valuation where a rebate or an award is not awarded.
Okay.
So you would not get a rebate of property taxes. It has to meet a certain threshold, and it usually goes through the judicial system. So if you're not awarded a rebate, all that would do is just, it would rebalance everybody else's rates, but nobody know about it because it's such a small amount.
But it would adjust everybody's,
Absolutely.
even though it might only be $100.
If you only had 2 houses in the city and one went in and protested their rates and they went down, the other person's taxes are going to go up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
The property tax, Mr. Welch, if we are comparing the property tax with our city's property tax? Is that we doing okay, low, high, medium? So can you tell us a bit?
Comparisons of property taxes are kind of a complex issue because every city provides services on a different basis. For example, in West Valley City, we have our own police force, we have our own fire, we have other auxiliaries. The council over the years is elected to provide services that maybe other cities haven't. There's also services that we've elected not to provide that other cities have done. And so it does make it a little bit challenging to compare it that way. I think probably a better thing that I would look at is the type of services that you are receiving, and then try and make sure that we provide what's best for the citizens.
And I would add to that, a city that's not providing police, they're getting billed separately, differently for unified police or for unified fire, or a city that provides utilities can increase their utility rates without increasing their property tax rates, where we don't provide any utilities, our revenue is restricted to the property tax.
And correct. I know there's a lot of cities that subsidize their general fund, their operations with their utility funds. Cities that have water or cities that have electricity, we do not have those utilities as a city. They're administered by service districts, and so we don't have the ability to really subsidize our operations with those.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you. I'm sure we'll be calling you back up in a minute, but we are going to now open the public input, public comment portion of this hearing, so that anybody who's here to speak about the budget for this coming fiscal year may do so at this time. Just come up to the podium and give us your name and address, and we'll be listening to your comments.
John Cross, 2545 South, 3560 West. Well, thanks for the explaining. Because that actually changes a lot of my discussion that I got here. So mainly what I was going to bitch about was there again with Boar, Longyear, and Firestone, and just tell you to tax the hell out of them instead of me. But it sounds like you already have. So in everything that I'm complaining about, say code enforcement, the fitness center, of course, being more expensive than, say, Kearns, Ochre Park, all this kind of crap that I had written down here to try to present, costs more money. So really, I think you ought to raise taxes. You haven't presented any extra additional taxes. I even noticed that on the list. We're at the same. I thought the judgment was about judges, not judgment levy. So, yeah, I was completely misinformed, so I'm kind of stupid. So, I really don't have much of a disagreement with what's going on, because we need to double our code enforcement officers. We need to essentially double our police officers, and you can't do that, keep cutting the money down. So, I guess I'm good with everything as it is, thanks.
Thank you. Look for another city to live. Move to another city.
I'm good here.
Please come forward.
You can always write up a check. My name is Craig Baker. I live at 5793 West Coral Hill Circle, which is just off the Ridge Golf Course. Can you tell me who sets the percentage of the increase on the value of my house? Is that a city, county, state?
Can we do it
lottery?
Can we do it this way? Would you please make whatever comment you have, and then if there are questions, we'll have Mr. Welch address
This
those.
goes into that question of why mine went up almost 20% in 1 year. My taxes have gone up $1,000 in 3 years. So that's why I'm asking, is it the city who is responsible for this? I'll give you another example. I have a card here they mailed me that said the Granite School District took no tax increase. On my paperwork, my taxes for the Granite School District went up $600 a year.
Yeah, mine too. So I
So that's what I'm saying. How do you value my houses versus the one in 27th West, say? Is it a straight across 20%? Is this 5? Is this 9? That's my question.
Okay, and is that...
Which applies to West Valley, not necessarily
Okay.
the tax picture.
And is that question the substance of your comment?
Yes.
Okay, then Mr. Welch, could you answer the questions about how properties are valued?
Absolutely, thank you. Property valuation is handled on a county basis. The city has no input on that. As a matter of fact, the county goes out on a regular basis and they attempt to do the best job they can evaluating the market value of every property listed within the city and within the county for that matter. The fact that maybe your property tax went up significantly this year, even though you didn't have a property tax increase, might be a result of someone else's property being valued less than yours was. So their increase was less than your increase was, and because yours went up, you ended up actually paying a little bit more taxes. So it's very hard to say, according to the rate, how much am I going to pay this year? Because what happens is they look at all the ships in the ocean, and then they try and make them all level. Well, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. I can guarantee you that if we took all the taxpayers and put them in one bucket, there would be some that unfortunately ended up paying quite a bit more, which sounds like both of you did, and there would also be some that paid less. Does that answer the question?
No.
No. Absolutely not.
The answer was
Well,
the county.
Now,
Yeah, here,
The county.
Yep.
Yeah. County owns it.
Jim, may I jump in a second? If you are not happy or you're not satisfied with the tax you have received from your home, you can appeal to the county. You make some comparison adjacent, some like houses adjacent some from your house or in your area, and you do that comparison and bring to the county, make that, basically to show it to them, and they can sit down with you and they figure out the number, and maybe sometimes, like Jim said, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. But you can do that. And that maybe you can, satisfy with the things you question about, or you're happy with, maybe you're not happy too. But you have to do that, option you can do. You do some comparison and bring it to the county and talk to them. But you have to do it before September. Yeah.
And we certainly encourage people to do that. It's a wise thing to do if you feel like your property has been overvalued. That preliminary tax notice that you get, I think it's in August, it says in September you've got to have your protest done. Take a good look at that because it will affect your taxes next year and probably for years to come. So if you've been overvalued, take advantage of the appeals process. Certainly businesses are doing it and individuals have the exact same right.
I was just going to add that many times, as Granite School District did, they did not raise their tax rate. So they didn't raise taxes. But if your evaluation was down here last year, and it's up here this year, your rate's going to go up to meet that evaluation. So as the county does that evaluation of homes, I know mine went up this year. And I don't know, I didn't add anything onto it, but it's up higher than it was before, so.
There's another element particular to taxing entities, and I know the school district has done this time. Whenever they hold a bond election for building new properties, that also goes on your property tax bill and would increase your property taxes. So every time you have an election, if there's a bond issue on there, that's a tax increase.
which there was last year with Granite. Mr. Welch, do you know if the county evaluates every property every year, or are they on kind of a rotating schedule to get through the city and the county and evaluate the values of the properties?
They came under some pretty severe criticism several years back because of that, as the recession was really kind of kicking up. And they have attempted to increase the frequency with which the properties are evaluated. I know they have some new models that they use. I don't know that they actually get out to every property every year. They make a good faith attempt to make sure that everyone is accurate, but their actual process, I know they've increased their ability to be more accurate, but I couldn't speak to their actual process.
Okay. So what we do as a city is we tell the county we're going to collect $30 million property tax. Then the county goes through and says, well, you have this many properties, there are these varying values, this is who's gonna pay which part of that $30 million. And it sends you a bill, which includes Granite School District, Granger, Under Improvement District, everybody else that's on that bill. And then we get our share based upon the county's valuation of your property to make up the tax that we told them we were gonna collect for our general fund and for our budget, that you could see, you saw the slides and can see all on the internet how that money is spent. Anybody else for a comment?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Pro Tem, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, you go first. Go ahead.
Just give us your name and address and let's hear what you have to say, sir.
I'll be super quick. My name is Sean Black. I'm at 5356 West Septon Drive, right there with the Highbury subdivision. So, a few things. I appreciate the comments that were made because it makes sense now, because I have a property, so off of 5600 West, I have one property at 2800 South, and I have another one at 3900 South. So the only thing that's really different is the zip code, because you have above ground square feet, one's at 1500, one's at 2300. They're both the same tax area, they're both the same type of plan unit development. So what confused me was one was $2,000 more than the other one, so I'm kind of glad for the explanation. You also mentioned that there's no utilities, and I'm kind of ignorant to the area. That power plant over there off of 4700, is that not a West Valley?
Yeah, the gas plant.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, Rocky Mountain.
Okay, that's easy. And the last comment, I apologize. The gentleman back there, when he was talking about the roundabout, I just want to throw a quick thing in over there when he was talking about Darlington and Stockton. Right next to there's also a street, Halton, right there on Darlington. There's no stop sign there. I think if they put a stop sign in, it would probably help with the speed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for comment on our budget?
Just maybe just quick one. Just, this is actually, I'm gonna apologize. This is maybe understandable. Maybe quick one. How everyone homeowner who buy the new home over there, and this been simply explained, and buyer, single family home, feel if the another neighbor rent house to the family of three, and he pay less taxes what you do. And you have to live with the noise of the little kids, with all kind of stuff what's going on around. Why? From beginning, like we've been buying these homes, there's been a reason why we buy. No overnight parking, no rentals. But like I say, people just come and, okay, I'm, for example, paying $4,000. I'm fine with this, okay? With everything that I hear, it's just understandable. But why somebody take advantage of this and change our neighborhood to the actually apartment complex? If I want to live in an apartment, okay, I go there and, you know, apartment manager pay taxes for a whole deal and I don't worry about this, but I have to deal with all this stuff. USANA and rents. It's practically all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Come back. I live at Joe George. I live at 3089 South Finsbury by his. This is all new to me. A county never dictated our taxes. Each town in Massachusetts dictated their own tax structure. I don't understand why Salt Lake City, wherever downtown there, is dictating us in West Valley City what our tax structure should be. And what is, I asked before, maybe he knows, what is the dollar per thousand on residential and in business? You don't understand what I'm saying? And back in Massachusetts, my tax was $16 on 1,000. What is it here? That nobody knows. I don't understand. I'm paying taxes and nobody's got the dollar what I'm paying.
Wasn't it 0.004, so it's about $4 of 1,000. $4.10 of 1,000.
That's what it is, I'd be paying nothing for taxes.
Well, per
I
thousand
mean, I'd be paying
of,
nothing on what my townhouse has gone up 40 or 50,000 in 5 years. It isn't finished downstairs. But why does it go up like that? I mean, the state, the county should be dictating to West Valley
well,
City.
that's a matter of state law. I'm sure it's different in Massachusetts. There's nothing the city can do about that.
Why not? You're as big
We're-
as downtown.
We're an entity of the state, sir, but, so if we're paying $4 per $1,000 of the value of our house, you know, we have to keep in mind that the West Valley City tax bill is a third of the tax bill. It goes to many other entities as well.
That isn't the way, well, this is the way you guys do it. I mean, somebody's running the state that should be.
Well,
I mean, we should be by ourselves, 100-something thousand people. We should be able to have our own tax structure without the county coming in to tell us how the hell they
Come
do.
closer to the microphone.
I mean, I don't understand it. Well, whatever. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Anybody else like to make a public comment? If there's nobody else for public comment, we'll close the public hearing portion and bring it back to the council.
Here I have one comment, Mayor Pro Tem. My concern is just a little bit, well, that's a little bit concern to me. You're looking at all the items on the chart, they sent it to you over your house, and you see the Granite School and the West Valley City and so on and so on.
We're paying for everything else.
But the problem is big. The reason I'm saying the problem is big because I ran into a couple people, they're really upset about this. I will give you one example for this one. The strip mall, they own about 2014, and they pay an XYZ dollars amount for tax. And suddenly, just recently, they have a big jump like close to $10,000 for tax. And they signed a contract for tenants is the 5 years lease, 7-year lease. They cannot increase the rent to the tenants. They only have the 2% increase every year or 3% every year. And I have a big $10,000 tax. And not West Valley City understand that. But the Granite School had a big chunk of money in that list, they sent it to us, okay? And they cannot keep up with that number, and they have to use their own money to pay out for tax, and that's ridiculous. And I'm concerned about, look at the big picture here. I'm concerned about we're gonna loosen our tenants, because the landlord not gonna put up with that. I'm not gonna pay for $10,000 for tax. But the tenant said, well, I'm not going to do that too. You increase me 2% every year, 3% every year. I'm not going to chip in, or you're going to, it's illegal to the landlord to increase the tenants for big chunk. Because they signed a contract for 5 years already, and they have only first year, and then they have 4 more years left. And that's a big, big problem. Recently, I ran into 3 people. They built their building in 2014, okay? And I know the old building is, maybe they have a grandfather, so they don't have that big tax. I'll give you an example clearly. Baker Lake, right here, 2222 West, 3500 South, and 2200 West, 3500 South, that on 2 buildings, East and West. Their grandfather, they pay for $75,000 a year for tax, 52,000 square feet. Another guy down at 5600 West, only $8,000 square feet, and he paid for, you know how much? $20,000 property tax. And the guy over 3,500 South right here, he built his building 2014 too, 14,500 square feet. And how much he paid for tax? $49,200 for tax. Something wrong here. Something wrong here. And I'm really concerned about the future. People are going to move out the south. Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, Riverton, South Jordan, and we're losing our business. Because they cannot increase their rent. They lock in for 5 years with the tenants. For 7 years. So, are they willing to take the money out from their pocket and pay for every year? No, I don't think so. They're investors. They have to make money. Yeah.
Take somebody on Social Security. I got a $7 a month raise this year. My taxes went up.
I'm sorry, the public comment's closed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have to maintain order, and we did receive your comments.
So, that I'm really concerned, and I don't know. I'm just doing my homework right now. I'm working with the county and trying to figure out, try to learn something about this, and try to learn with other counties around here and try to figure out, and cities around here and try to figure out the number. Is the big concern for me, very big concern for me. I just want to say with you about it.
Thank you. I would mention, Mr. Cross mentioned, well, maybe we ought to raise taxes, and, you know, just as far as the council goes, yeah, I think you said that. This is the balance, this is the tightrope that we walk all the time, is how much do services cost, where should we be, what level of services can we provide, what sort of revenue can we receive, are we getting enough for our sales tax, are we putting enough into economic development to increase our sales tax? This is constantly on our minds and on the table as we try to maintain a good level of service without overtaxing our residents, of which we're all residents. I mean, we're not any of us taxing anybody more than we tax ourselves. We decided this year not to have a tax increase other than to recapture that $191,000 judgment levy when we do propose a tax increase, because guess what? People won't work at their same job for 10 or 20 years without getting a raise sometimes, and their health insurance goes up, and cost of paper and gasoline and everything else that we use goes up. Sometimes we do have to bump up our tax level, and it affects all of us, and we usually get big crowds saying we shouldn't raise taxes, but by the way, we need more police officers and more streets paved and repaired and things like that, all of which cost money. Any other comments from the council or any action that the council would like to take?
I move for approval of Resolution 18-124, our budget.
Second. Any comment to the motion? Then we'll turn to the city recorder for a roll call vote.
Councilman P.T. Simonu?
Aye.
Councilwoman Link?
Yes.
Councilman Hume?
Aye.
Councilman Christensen?
Yes.
Councilman Norfelt?
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Bueller.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item of business we have is Ordinance 18-27 to amend a certain section of our code regarding transactions between pedestrians and vehicles. We are concerned with the safety issues involved with that. We also, or I would know that there was an article or a news story within the past month or so commenting specifically on number of auto pedestrian accidents within the city. And as a safety measure, we're trying to take those transactions off of our main roads. This ordinance we've had for a couple of years, I believe, and this would add some additional main roads to that ordinance for that restriction. Did I get that right, Mr. Isaac?
Sir, very well done.
Anything you'd add to that for us?
No, no, sir.
And we'll bring that matter to the council, Ordinance 1827.
I would move for approval of Ordinance 18-27.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion to the motion? Ms. Kamek, will you please ask for the vote?
Councilman Norfelt?
Yes.
Councilman Christensen?
Yes.
Councilman Hume?
Aye.
Councilwoman Lang,
Yes.
Councilman Fitzie Umanu,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Bueller.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That brings us to our consent agenda, which are typically routine matters such as construction easements and the like that come up all the time. Nothing of any significant cost or expenditure. We sometimes will take these individually or as a body. We have several items on the consent agenda. If there's anything that the council would like to address or receive an explanation on specifically, we can deal with those individually, or we'll leave it to the council as to how to proceed with the consent agenda.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would move for approval of the 8 items on the consent agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Councilman Fitzie Umanu,
Aye.
Councilwoman Lang,
Yes.
Councilman Hune,
Aye.
Councilman Christensen,
Yes.
Councilman Nordfeld,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Bueller.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We have an item of new business, 18140. I guess that would be resolution 18140. I've got 140. Okay, overruled. It's 140. Resolution 140,
Okay, when I renewed it, to move it up one.
professional services agreement. We have received some communication from staff that perhaps we're not ready to proceed with that item at this time. What would be the council's pleasure?
I would move for continuance of 18-140.
Second.
That would be a continuance to a time certain or without date?
Just whenever staff is ready to bring it back before us.
Okay, we have and is that your second as well? We have a motion and a second. Could we have a vote, Ms. Kamek?
Councilman Nordfeld,
Yes.
Councilman Christensen,
Yes.
Councilman Hune,
Aye.
Councilwoman Lang,
Yes.
Councilman Fitzie Umanu,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Bueller.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I don't know of any need for an additional closed session today, so that would conclude our business unless there's anything else. We would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming tonight.